attending our presentation today. So just bear with us, and we will be starting very shortly. Jim, can you hear us?
I can.
Okay, great.
All right.
Okay.
It's actually going to take place, huh?
This is going to be great. I think we have quite a few attendees, and this will be a wonderful presentation.
All right.
No worries.
No worries.
Jim, you there?
I'm here.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Intellectual Property Litigation Surveys and Determining Their Costs. This webinar will address the reasons for using or not using a survey when determining the costs associated with intellectual property litigation. In addition, the presentation will cover the following: how many interviews or responses are needed for significant results in such IP litigation surveys, how many research venues are needed, how do you gauge the effectiveness of results, and also what can the client expect to pay for this research. Our presenter today is Mr. James T. Berger. Mr. Berger is the principal of James T. Berger Market Strategies, which is an Illinois-based company. He conducts extensive consulting and expert witness work for intellectual property attorneys throughout the U.S. His focus is the likelihood of confusion, trade dress, secondary meaning, genericness, and distinctiveness issues. In addition, Mr. Berger develops surveys and also critiques adversarial surveys. He also co-authored Trademark Surveys, A Litigator's Guide. Some of our attendees today are in states that require a passcode or code to earn CLE credit. And for your information today, our code will be intellectual. During the presentation, we will ask for everyone to state the code by typing it in through the chat feature located at the right of your screen. This will allow us to meet the requirements of those states that require a code. Using this same chat feature, we urge you to ask questions. Mr. Berger welcomes your questions, and we will take intermittent breaks during the presentation so he can respond. Tomorrow morning, we will send out an email with a link to an archived recording of the webinar. And then also before leaving the presentation, we ask that you take the time to fill out the survey that will appear on the screen after today's program. The survey is also a CLE requirement in some states. I will now turn the program over to our distinguished presenter, Mr. James T. Berger. And Jim, the program is now yours.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. The title of this presentation is Intellectual Property Litigation Surveys, Determining the Costs. Let me give you a little bit of information about my background. Just a minute. Okay. I am a real-world marketing professional. I've been a marketing consultant for more years than I care to mention, about 40 years. And in addition to that, I have been a college professor, an adjunct college professor, for a number of Chicago schools for about 30 years. In the last 20 years, I've developed an expertise in creating surveys for intellectual property attorneys. Let's start and take a look at what is a survey. And I think that's the essence of this presentation, is to determine what a survey is. A survey essentially is a scientific experiment to prove or disprove a hypothesis. In other words, you have some kind of cause and effect supposition that you want to prove. You might want to prove that advertising is leading people to do something that they shouldn't be doing, or that a trademark is confused with another trademark, or a trademark isn't recognized in the marketplace. So we'll talk about some of these issues that my surveys cover. But I think it's very important to understand that surveys are a high-risk, high-return venture. It costs money to do surveys. It's risky to do surveys. It's risky because it costs money, and your results may not be what you're looking for. So we will, as this presentation goes on, we'll explore some of these things and try to point out the benefits and the problems of doing these kinds of things. Why do we need a survey? Well, what we're trying to do is we're trying to prove or disprove a number of things. Likelihood of confusion is one of the things that a lot of my surveys are directed at. The idea of one trademark being confused with another trademark, one symbol, one logo being confused with something else. We're very concerned with infringement. We're very concerned with somebody taking over somebody else's trademark and representing it as their own trademark. Another area of concern is secondary meaning. Secondary meaning is acquired distinctiveness. You may have a trademark that may not be terribly distinctive, but maybe through use it has become distinctive. And a secondary meaning survey will go into the marketplace and determine whether people in the marketplace recognize the trademark, but more important than recognizing the trademark, attest that the trademark comes from a single source. Another thing that we get involved with is genericness. Many times a trademark like a Kleenex or Frigidaire or other things, Band-Aid, which are registered trademarks, are generic, become generic. There's such good trademarks that people use them as generic marks. For example, Xerox. When you tell somebody you want to Xerox this document or make me 10 Xerox copies, Xerox is a trademark. It's a registered trademark, but it is morphed into the vernacular, and people simply refer to making copies as Xeroxing copies. One of the cases that I'm working on right now deals with Google. and the idea of Google being Google as an adjective, the Google search engine is indeed a very strong and very good trademark. However, we use the word Google as a generic mark. Google this person. Go on and Google this whatever. So that has become kind of a generic mark and an interesting one. Another area that we get involved with is distinctiveness. Trademarks have certain levels of importance. A fanciful name like a Sony is a very strong trademark, whereas a name like I'm trying to think of something. Perhaps some food product that is somewhat healthy choice, for example, which is somewhat descriptive, may not have that distinctiveness. And if you can prove distinctiveness, you probably can prove secondary meaning. Another area that surveys get very involved in is truth in advertising. A lot of times people will file a lawsuit because some information that is imparted on a website or an advertisement or something is deemed not to be truthful. And so surveys can help prove or disprove that. Why we would not want to do a survey is surveys are expensive. I did an article not terribly long ago about the idea being that how do you make a determination of whether you want to do a survey or not? First of all, surveys take time, although they don't take as much time as people seem to think they do. But they do cost money. What you really want to do is find out, make a determination of what your risk is, what your exposure is. And depending on how much you stand to lose or how much you stand to gain, that would be the key decision factor on whether you would do a survey or not. So why we would not want to do a survey? Time and money. Universal reasons for anything. Let's talk about some types of surveys. And there are many types of surveys. There's telephone surveys, which were the most common surveys for many, many years, and they've gone out of favor of late. Very few people are doing telephone surveys, and I'll explain why. The reason why telephone surveys are not being used are all the technological constraints that have developed between the survey and the respondent. Voicemail, caller ID. When I'm sitting at home watching TV and somebody's calling me, I see the name and number flashed up on the television screen. And if it's an 800 number or if it's an obvious number that's not important to me, I won't answer the phone. So telephone surveys have lost favor. The incidence, the number of people who actually connect on a telephone survey continues to go down, which makes the telephone survey increasingly more expensive. Another type of survey that was very popular and still has a certain level of popularity is the Mall Intercept Survey. The Mall Intercept Survey is done in shopping malls, and the shopping mall would have a research facility within the shopping mall, and recruiters from that research facility would filter through the mall and try to attract people to participate in the survey. And if they do qualify, then these individuals are brought into the research center, sat down, and they sit down with another researcher. Perhaps it's the same one who recruited them, and then they are asked a series of questions. Perhaps they're seated in front of a computer screen and asked to go through the computer screen and answer questions on the screen. The type of survey that I have of late become very enamored with, and not only myself but other survey experts, is the Internet survey. The fact of the matter is that virtually everybody goes onto the Internet on a daily basis, and for some reason people are not terribly reluctant to fill out surveys that come through on the Internet. Perhaps they're enamored with the technology or enamored with being the interactive nature of the Internet. But Internet surveys draw pretty well. And what makes Internet surveys especially effective are these consumer panels that are out there. And these consumer panels have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people who have told these panel companies that they want to do surveys. And when a survey has to be done, it is sent out, or it is communicated to the panel to see if people qualify for the survey. And if they do, they take the survey, and they're rewarded for taking the survey in some way in terms of points or incentives or something like that. So that is a survey that most of my work now, I'd say the majority of my work, is involved in Internet surveys. Another type of survey, and it's a very expensive survey, is what we call the pre-recruit. This is the idea of if you're looking to find a very, very specific type of individual, like a construction worker, or a doctor, or a lawyer, or somebody who's very much different from a lot of other people. You're not about to find them in a shopping mall, and you're not probably going to find them over the Internet. But you will get lists of people who are in that category, and you may, what we call pre-recruit them, call them up, pay them a very handsome incentive, have them report to or come to a research center, and at that point they administer the survey, and they take the survey. A form of pre-recruit, I guess, is focus groups. I imagine a lot of you have attended focus groups at one time or another, where you are contacted in advance. You are asked if you want to participate. If you do, you manage to get to the research center at a prescribed time, and you sit down and you are administered the survey, whether it's a one-on-one, whether it's a focus group. Another type of survey is the on-site survey. And a lot of people seem to think that this is a survey that's an easy survey to do. For example, we're going to be at a trade show. Maybe we can interview people at a trade show. Or going into a department store or a specialty store and trying to find people who are qualified to take the survey within the store. This is a very difficult survey to do. On-site surveys are about the hardest surveys that I know, because they're very hard to, they tend to be biased. The product in question may be displayed in the store. A lot of things about on-site surveys make them a very difficult kind of survey to do. Another type of survey which I really like to do is, and it kind of has some of the advantages of the pre-recruit and some of the advantages of the telephone survey, and that's what I call the hybrid telephone Internet survey. And in that particular survey, usually people in very specialized fields, are contacted and incentivized and asked if they can participate in a survey. And if they agree to participate in the survey, then somebody will call them. A researcher will call them over the phone, and at that time they would be seated in front of a computer. They would go to a website, and then the survey would be administered online with the researcher as part of the survey. What that type of survey enables you to do is to ask questions to probe questions, to probe answers. It's a very, very powerful form of survey. Well, surveys cover a lot of territory, a lot of different ways of doing them. And that's really the essence of the methodology that you put together. When I'm contacted by an attorney, for example, the first thing I'll determine, of course, is what has to be proven or disproven, and then what is the most effective way of trying to get that information. As I mentioned, the telephone survey is really become a victim of technology. So many people have given up their landlines. They don't even have landlines anymore. They completely use cell phones. The caller ID process will filter out any kind of research calls. Incentives are very hard to manage over the telephone. So telephone surveys are a type of survey that was extremely effective and is somewhat passé. Now, telephone surveys are still used very extensively in not in intellectual property research per se, but in for political polling, for example. That's really the only way you're going to get information for political polling. However, the problems that the telephone survey has for intellectual property has the same kinds of problems for polling. People aren't using their landlines. Cell phones are hard to it's hard to get numbers. There's no cell phone directory out there, so you can't find numbers that way. So it's become a very difficult survey to do. Now, the Moral Intercept Survey is also a form of research that is, I think it's past its prime. First of all, very few malls, relatively very few malls, have research facilities. And you just can't go to any mall and do research. You need a research center. If you do a Moral Intercept study, you have to train all your personnel. The tabulations are difficult in a Moral Intercept because in most cases the tabulations are done by hand, or the questionnaire is filled out by hand, and you lack the advantage of having a survey that's filled out electronically. And another problem, and this has been a problem with Moral Intercept surveys as long as Moral Intercept surveys have been around, is the concept of validation. Unfortunately, many of these shopping malls or the research centers within these shopping malls are somewhat unscrupulous in their business practices. They're generally paid on the basis of the number of completed surveys they can do. And if a research center is looking to fill a quota and they can't find enough qualified people, they might create the answers or find somebody who isn't qualified to take the survey and use those. And that's how the validation process came in, where an independent research company will call these people that allegedly participated in the survey and screen them and make sure that they were eligible to participate. Not only eligible, but make sure that they actually participated in the survey. So that's a problem with the Moral Intercept survey, is the validation, the difficulty in tabulating, the need to train, and all the personnel in the mall research center have to be trained. The interviewers, the screeners, everybody. There are some advantages to the Moral Intercept survey, though, and these advantages will make sure that Moral Intercept surveys will still be part of our environment. You can show actual products in a Moral Intercept survey. You can put the product in the respondent's hands. They can look at it. They can open the box. They can smell the product. They can, you've got that immediacy. In the mall Intercept, you can simulate a research environment. You can actually put shopping. You can put products on shelves, and people can make selections of products as they see them on shelves. The costs of mall intercepts are higher, of course, than telephone or internet, but the costs are manageable. A problem of mall intercepts, of course, is a function of mall traffic. A lot of people don't shop in malls anymore. A lot of people are shopping online. And who goes to shopping malls today? You find that the audience at shopping malls are skewed to younger people and not the cross-section that you're looking for. And you also need some significant incentives. Nobody's going to do a survey in a mall without getting $5 or $10 or some such amount of money to come and take time from their day to go into the research center and fill out the survey. But the mall has got advantages and the mall has disadvantages. This is probably a good point to stop and see if you have some questions.
Hi, Jim. Yes, this is Carol. And before we go to the Q&A section or segment of the presentation, I am going to ask that all of the attendees type in the code that was given at the beginning of the presentation in the chat feature. And again, this is for states that, for their CLE credit, this requirement exists for some of those states. So we need all of the attendees to type in the code that was given at the very beginning of the presentation. And I can see everybody is already typing those in, so everyone's been really paying attention. So I'm going to go to the first question. Are you ready, Jim?
I am ready.
Okay. And our first question is, how much time from inception to research report does it take to do a trademark survey?
Okay. It very much depends on what kind of a survey you're doing. If you are doing a straight consumer survey, perhaps a consumer packaged good, perhaps some kind of a product that is considered to be a consumer product as opposed to a business-to-business or trade product. Consumer surveys can be done in under 3 weeks from inception to final report. They can be done even faster than that, depending on what your target market is and what you're trying to look at. For example, I did some surveys on search engines. I did some stuff on Apple computer products, Microsoft products. Those surveys, the responses of those surveys were incredibly fast. I did some work for Nordstrom in terms of name recognition, and those surveys were done very quickly. However, if you are trying to do a business-to-business type thing, or you're trying to focus on a particular segment of the market, and it may be a narrow segment, it can be devastatingly long to get a sufficient number of respondents for that survey. I was involved in a survey this year where a trade name was in question and a particular type of field was involved, the field of food testing. And it just, it took days and days in order to get the numbers of people that we needed to have meaningful results. So how long does it take? Like anything else, it depends. It depends mainly on what you're what product or industry you're looking into and what you're trying to prove.
Okay, now, here's a question on the mall surveys.
Yeah.
When you talk about the surveys that you do at the malls, are we talking specifically about strip malls or indoor malls or both?
Primarily indoor malls. Primarily malls that are covered, not strip malls. You want a situation where people come into the mall, where they filter through the mall, where they're in a confined area, and there are certain places within the mall that the recruiters will focus on. Food court is usually one of them, is a good example. And at that particular point, they will take a look at the people who are there. If they're looking for, say, if they're looking for women, or if they're looking for housewives, or if they're looking, whatever they're looking for, they can generally get an idea of who's in the mall and approach those people and inquire whether they would be interested in taking a survey, and if so, describing the incentive that they would be given if they took the survey. And if they are interested, then they would be escorted to the research center where the survey would be administered.
So when you create a survey, is there a certain profile that is created at the same time, so that if you go out to give the survey, you have a certain profile of the individual you're looking for?
Exactly. You can be very specific in who you're looking for, in terms of gender, in terms of age, in terms of buyer behavior characteristics, whether they own a computer or whether they own a particular type of cell phone, or whether they travel. You can, in your screening, what you would do in a survey is you would put together what we call a screener, and in your screener you would make a determination of exactly who you want to interview. And when you're looking for those kinds of people, those people have got to answer yes to those screening questions in order to qualify for the survey. Okay?
Okay, thank you. Now, I have another question.
Okay.
Are there specific products, let me word this a different way. When you're taking a survey, or is there a certain type of survey that you would use for certain types of products?
That really depends on what the product is and what you're trying to learn about the product. If you're trying to find out if people recognize the product, that's one thing. If there's a particular attribute about the product that you want to probe, that's another thing. So it would be, if you're dealing in products, you would have to have a very specific focus on what you're looking for in terms of what you're trying to learn from the marketplace about how the product is perceived, how the product is used, what people like or don't like about the product. All of those things would be part of the survey.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't see any more questions at this point, but we will also be having a second question and answer segment, so everyone please feel free to type in your questions in the chat feature. So I'm going to turn the presentation back to you, Jim, and we can continue on.
Okay. Let's talk about the pre-recruit survey, which I kind of overviewed earlier. In the pre-recruit, you are looking for a very specific target market, and usually a non-consumer market. I've done quite a bit of work for a law firm in Chicago that represents a tool company, and it was necessary in some of these surveys not to talk to consumers who use power tools, but to workmen who use power tools. Okay, so how do you do a face-to-face, person-to-person interview with a workman? You certainly can't do it in a mall, because in any given time you're not going to find very many workmen in a mall. You can't do it over the telephone, because it's probably necessary to show the product. So what you would do is you would do what we call a pre-recruit. You would call these people up, and you would invite them to visit the research center after hours, 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night, and have them come in and at that particular point do the survey. You generally need a very large incentive to do a pre-recruit. The very nature of a marketing or a trademark, any kind of a survey, it's intrusive. You're asking people to spend their time to do something that they wouldn't necessarily want to do, but do something that you would want them to do. So therefore, you're renting their time, and you have to pay money to rent their time. So in those workman surveys, for example, I think $75 was the amount of money that we agreed to pay. And that seemed to be enough money to encourage them to get into their car and come over to the research center and answer some questions. Pre-recruits become very, very difficult when you are talking to highly paid people, like doctors. Doctors are not interested in $75 to come in and do a survey. Doctors probably wouldn't be inspired to do a survey by really any amount of money. So how would you recruit a doctor? I've done several surveys where we've had to talk to doctors, and one of the things that I've come up with is rather than give the money to the doctor, inquire from the doctor if he has a cause or a charity that he is interested in. And then tell the doctor that if you would participate in the survey, you would make a $100 donation to that cause or to that charity. And that somehow removes the onus of the doctor doing something for money in his own pocket, and enables him to participate in the survey knowing that some cause that he's involved in would benefit from his time. So that's something that I've come up with over the years that seems to work in trying to recruit people who ordinarily wouldn't want to spend their time doing a survey. The Internet survey, which I talked about earlier, has become the ideal consumer survey vehicle, I believe. One of the reasons why Internet surveys are so effective is they've become accepted by the courts. There was a time when lawyers were reluctant to do Internet surveys because they felt that, the courts won't accept them. Obviously, lawyers tend to be more on the conservative. They're looking for precedent. And unless there's a precedent out there, the lawyer might be reluctant to do that kind of a survey. Well, I did an article in June of this year for Intellectual Property Today, and the title of the article is "Internet Surveys Come of Age." Incidentally, as an aside, I've written a number of articles, and I've written a book. The book I can't give you, but the articles I can. If you are interested in articles that I have written, simply send me an email, and I'll be happy to send the articles to you. I've written 17 of them. I don't think you'd want all of them, but if you go to my website, you probably can find many of the articles that I've written. If you look at my CV, you can probably find some of the articles that I've written. And anything that looks of interest to you, by all means, send me an email, request it, and I'll email it back to you. In that article that I did on the Internet, I found that a number of survey experts have attested that the courts are very much predisposed to accepting data coming from Internet surveys. A number of experts I refer to in the article point out that the courts have bought into the concept of people who are online, who take surveys online, who tell the truth when they're taking the surveys online. And the Internet survey has become a really, really significant factor in the survey marketplace. And it's cheap. You can do it very, very reasonably, and it's fast. So that kind of survey can be very effective. And the Internet, because of the technological basis of it, you can use sight and sound technology. You could put sounds over the Internet. You can put images of products on the Internet. You can put all sorts of illustrations of people and products online in such a way that people are able to recognize them. The Internet survey, the turnaround on an Internet survey is very, very fast. It's done on a real-time basis. So every time a person fills out a survey, the data goes right into a data bank where it's tabulated. It becomes a very, very fast way of doing it. If you're looking for large numbers, say you have a consumer product that a lot of people buy or make use of, an Internet survey can provide those kinds of large numbers. As I mentioned, you can reproduce images and icons and anything in an Internet survey. And Internet surveys, by use of the consumer panels, have become extremely cost-efficient. A lot cheaper to do an Internet survey than a mall intercept. A lot cheaper. Not as cheap as a telephone interview, which is essentially can be done for nothing. But the problem with the telephone, as we mentioned, you can't get the numbers. You can get the numbers from an Internet survey, and you can do it very cost-effectively. So if somebody comes to me and needs to do a survey for a product that lends itself, my first suggestion will probably be the Internet survey. And I'm not alone in this. Others in my field do the same thing. The pros of the Internet survey allows for visuals, sounds, videos, low transmission cost, real-time tabulation, and validation becomes very simple. What I generally do in an Internet survey is at the end of the survey, I'll put optional. I'll ask for their name and telephone number. I'll point out at the beginning of the survey that they won't be contacted. Nobody's trying to sell them anything. But we do ask for their name and phone number, and that helps us in validating, making sure that they were qualified and that they did indeed take the survey. Problem with Internet survey, everything has problems. Unfortunately, that's what life is all about. You have good things and you have bad things. The response rates for Internet surveys tend to be very, very low. In some surveys, it's important to get higher response rates. People will start an Internet survey and abandon it, so you've got low click-through rates. You definitely do need to have some kind of an incentive to get somebody to participate, and you have this problem of non-response. You may, if you're looking for 100 responses, you may have to go to 2,000 people to get 100 responses. If you're not sure of the results in an Internet study, you might have to do a backup study. You might have to do a mall intercept or telephone survey as a backup to that Internet. So it's a very powerful device, but it does have its benefits and it has its risks. But by and large, I'm very happy with the Internet survey. Most of my peers are very happy with the Internet survey, and the courts seem happy with them. The on-site intercept survey, as I mentioned, a lot tougher to do than you think it would. a lot of times I would sit down with a client and they'll say, well, why don't we go into the store, or why don't we talk to customers as they come into the store? Very hard to do. Stores don't want researchers in their stores. You generally have to get deep approvals in order to do that kind of survey. Logistics can be very cumbersome. Getting people into the store, being able to show the merchandise that you want to show, or whatever you're trying to do. You generally need pretty significant incentives. Very difficult to execute, and you have to avoid bias. I was involved very recently in as a survey critiquer in a survey that was done for a specialty product, a very, very high-priced wristwatch product. And the survey was done in the stores where the watch was sold. And of course, I didn't like that very much. I didn't think that was a very good way to go. I thought it was somewhat biased to do it that way. And I don't understand. Well, I guess I do understand why the stores allowed the researchers to be there, because it was a significant product that the store was selling. But that's a survey that I never would have done myself, and I would have a lot of trouble defending that kind of a survey. As I mentioned, that hybrid, the telephone web survey, is a very, very good technique if you can find the right kind of situation that lends itself to it. It has all those advantages that the pre-recruit would have, but if you can do it without actually having to put somebody face-to-face with the product, it can work very nicely. The respondent has got to be able to go online. You can show the visuals. An interviewer may or may not be needed. You could just make arrangements for the person to go online on their own and then take the survey, or it may be desirable to have an interviewer on the other end who could ask probing questions. Not only the key questions is why, and why do you say that, and probe it further. Are there any other answers or whatever? And you do need pretty good incentives for the telephone web survey. In planning and executing a survey, there are very specific rules that you should follow. First of all, determine precisely what has to be proven. Isolate your target market. And be mindful of the channels of trade. There was one survey that I did a long time ago, one of the most effective surveys that I have ever done. It dealt with a product that was sold in one of these dollar stores. And the contention was that people who shopped at the dollar stores also shopped at Target or Walmart or something like that. So what we did in that particular survey is we stationed researchers outside those dollar stores, and when the people came out, we asked them where else they shopped, and sure enough, it turned out they did shop at those stores. That particular piece of information was all that was necessary for a lawyer to win a case, because the one hang-up on the case was channels of trade, and once we proved that, it was taken care of. In planning and executing a survey, have your expert develop a survey that offers evidence of what needs to be proved or disproved. Be very specific, be very focused. Play devil's advocate. Always try to determine yourself what's wrong with your survey. Because believe me, somebody else is going to find out what's wrong with your survey. There's no such thing as a perfect survey. Every survey can be critiqued. And there's no shortage of experts out there who will critique the work of any survey expert. There will always be a critique. In planning and executing a survey, what you want to do is develop your protocol, your instructions. If it's a mall intercept, instructions to your interviewers, your screener. Who in particular are you trying to reach? Your questionnaire. Make sure that the questions are easy to understand. They're not compound questions. You're only asking for one thing. You're not asking for something that has a and or an or in the question. Make sure that there's a procedure for tabulating the questionnaire and a procedure for validating. You want to, in pilot testing, I'm a believer that every survey should be pilot tested. It's important that you go into the marketplace, you make sure that your wording is right. You want to make sure that your results are going to be within the realm of possibility. You're looking for 20% and you get 5% on the pilot, abandon the survey. Don't throw any more money down the rat hole. If you're looking for 20% and you get 30%, then you might say, this looks like it's a survey that's going to fly. So you want to be able to predict your eventual results. Don't fall in love with any survey. If the results are not there, be prepared to abandon the survey. And don't ignore data that comes out of the survey that doesn't seem to be appropriate. I did a survey once for, it dealt with a high-priced foreign car. And it dealt with a dealership that was suing the manufacturer because they weren't getting enough of those cars. And so we interviewed people who shopped at that dealership but bought elsewhere. And we asked them how they felt about the dealership, and they pointed out that they thought the dealership was very arrogant, that they were very hard to do business with. Of course they were. They didn't have very many cars. Unfortunately, the client didn't care for that data, but the other attorney who was deposing me sure loved it. And the data was so harmful that they eventually gave up the results of the survey. You've got to be sure that every piece of data that comes out of that survey is a good piece of data. Rule of thumb. If you're going to do interviews, 200 to 300 interviews, 200 minimum, 300 is a very good number, or greater. If you're doing a mall intercept survey, you have to go to at least 4 venues. Say a West Coast, Midwest, South, and East. Percentages needed for significance. For likelihood of confusion, anything over 25% is solid. Some courts are willing to take less than that. The rule of thumb that I use, if you can get 20% for a likelihood of confusion survey, you've got good results. And if you're doing a secondary meaning survey, you better get 50%. Anything below 10%, your confusion is unlikely, and your survey is probably going to be ineffective. Time and cost and time provisions. The mall intercepts are generally done on a per interview basis. Incentives are needed. If you're going to do a typical mall intercept survey, figure $30,000 to $45,000 will get you your survey. Telephone surveys are very cheap, but again, you get what you pay for. You probably can do a telephone survey $15,000 to $20,000, but again, it's a very hard survey to do, and as the cost per interview goes up, those costs are going to go up. The pre-recruits are very expensive. If you're going to do a pre-recruit, figure $40,000 to $65,000. We use controls a lot of times in surveys. Some survey experts say controls are mandatory. I don't believe they're mandatory. I believe they're desirable. They attempt to filter out noise. They attempt to filter out extraneous stuff that comes into the survey. They're not mandatory, but they can strengthen the results. Your typical example of a control is your sugar pill example, where you have a drug and you have a placebo, and you examine the results from the placebo as it compares with the actual drug. I think in doing surveys, the role of creativity is very, very important. And when you hire a survey expert, be sure you get a creative survey expert, not somebody who does cookie-cutter stuff, because these surveys tend to be different, and I tend to be a little bit more risky. I'm not so afraid to innovate. There are other people who will just do the same survey over and over again. When you find an expert, be sure to use his non-legal skills. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm a good survey expert, and I bring something to the party that a lawyer can't, and so that's a part of what I feel is important.
Okay, thank you very much, Jim. Now, before we enter again the question and answer segment, I will again ask all of the attendees to please, through the chat feature, enter the code or passcode word that we gave at the very beginning of the presentation. And again, this code is required by some states for for CLE requirements. Anyway, so now, Jim, as our attendees are typing in the code word, I have a couple of more questions for you.
Wonderful.
Okay, and here's a question. Answers to a survey can be skewed depending on the question to achieve a certain result. How do you overcome faulty statistical results?
Well, you try ahead of time to make sure that those questions that you're asking are good, strong questions. They're not leading questions. They're not questions that suggest any answer. When I said, be your own devil's advocate, believe me, if there's anything that's going to do that, the expert that's going to criticize you is going to be all over that like a bad suit. So you just got to be very, very careful and be mindful of where your survey can go wrong and try to guard for that.
Okay. And what are the least expensive and most expensive surveys, and does cost in any way relate to the dependability of the survey?
The least expensive survey is the telephone survey. The most expensive survey would be some form of pre-recruit. I don't think cost is that much of a factor. I think I don't think you can. If you spend more money, you're going to get a better survey. I don't believe that. I believe that your best survey will be to intellectually determine what you're looking for, who your target market is, whether that target market is, whether you're able to reach that target market, and how that survey, how effective that survey is in learning about the thinking of the target market and the buyer behavior characteristics of the target market. I don't believe spending more money will get you a better survey.
And now, there on the internet there are different types of surveys that people can use. One is
SurveyMonkey and stuff like that.
SurveyMonkey and those. What are you seeing as far as those being used and the type of results that they get?
Well, that's not we survey experts will use those devices. Generally, the way I work is that I don't execute the surveys myself. I create the surveys, and I have a research company out there that does the execution, and they'll use any kind of a format that they think works best to get those results. Qualtrics is the one that I use a lot, and so that's the one that. But they're all essentially the same. They're very good devices. If you're doing work for an organization or something, you can use those online templates, and they work very, very well. They're very easy to use and they're very cheap.
Okay. We have another question. Are there any precautions when you were deposed regarding a plot survey that did not show good results?
Good question. What I tell my clients is that when you hire me as a consulting expert. Now, as a consulting expert, my work with the attorney is privileged, and the pilot survey could be very much a function of the consulting survey arrangement. So if as a consulting expert I do a pilot survey and the results aren't any good, then I'm not required, and I don't believe the attorney is required to report those results. However, once I become a testifying expert, then everything that goes on between the attorney and myself is discoverable. And therefore, at that particular point, it would be mandatory to report the results of a pilot survey if it was relevant to the actual eventual report that I put out. So that's the answer to that is be mindful of the consulting expert versus the testifying expert. Consulting expert is privileged. Consulting expert is discoverable. Testifying expert is discoverable. I'm sorry.
Okay, and we have two more questions.
All right.
How do the courts feel about internet surveys?
They like them. I mentioned that earlier in the presentation. They seem to like them a lot. Request my article, Internet Surveys Come of Age, in the June Intellectual Property Today. It's pretty well documented how the courts accept the Internet surveys.
Okay. And here is our final question. Is there any such thing as the perfect survey?
No. There is no such thing as the perfect survey. Any survey is subject to criticism. And believe me, no matter how good your survey is, somebody will find an expert that will criticize it. Whether the criticism is valid or not, that's beside the point. But it sure looks good, and they sure can say an awful lot of things. There is no such thing as a perfect survey.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Well, thank you.
I think that's all of the questions for today. And at this point, I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending, and most especially Mr. Berger for his time and effort in creating this presentation for all of us. If you would I hope you enjoyed it. And as I said, if any of you ever have a question about surveys or about anything to do with them, feel free to call me. I will answer any question that you have. I'll try to help you in any way that I can. Okay, and if you would like to speak with Jim, or if you would like to
I've been working with TRSA for I don't know how many years now, and we've done some awfully good things together, and I value the relationship very highly.
Thank you very much. You can reach us at 1-800-523-2319 if you'd like to speak with Jim, or if you would like to also speak with a TRSA representative. And I want to thank you again. Have a good day, and that concludes our program.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Bye.